You open the fridge. You barely look. Cheese, bread, leftover rice, a carton of milk that expires in 3 days. None of it grew where you're standing. But for almost the entire history of your species, that sentence would have made no sense at all. For nearly 300,000 years, humans ate only what the land handed them that day. No fridge, no shelf, no guarantee. So what did your ancestors actually eat before farming existed? The real answer is far stranger than meat or berries. It is a story of chemistry, desperation, and a diet so varied it barely resembles anything on a modern plate. Start with the myth. You have probably heard that ancient humans were mostly meat-eaters, chasing mammoths across frozen plains. That image is dramatic. It sells documentaries. It is also mostly wrong. Anthropologist Catherine Milton spent decades studying the diets of primates and early humans, and her research points somewhere else entirely. Most ancient diets leaned heavily on plants. Roots, tubers, nuts, seeds, and wild fruit made up the bulk of daily calories in nearly every reconstructed foraging diet. Meat mattered. It was prized. But it was not the daily foundation people imagine. Why does this matter? Because your body still carries the fingerprints of that plant-heavy past. Your saliva contains enzymes built specifically to break down starch, not protein, starch. If your ancestors were eating meat as their main fuel source, that enzyme would make little sense. It exists because early humans were constantly processing starchy plants, and their digestive systems evolved around that reality. Here is where the story gets stranger. Researcher Amanda Henry examined dental plaque from Neanderthal teeth, tens of thousands of years old, and found microscopic starch granules trapped inside. Some of those granules showed signs of heating. That means Neanderthals, long dismissed as brutish meat hunters, were cooking plants, root vegetables, wild grains, foods that needed heat to become digestible. This was not an occasional behavior. It appeared across multiple sites, multiple time periods, multiple populations. Cooking plants was not rare. It was routine. Pause and consider what that means. Long before agriculture, long before anyone planted a single seed on purpose, humans were already managing fire specifically to unlock nutrition from plants that would otherwise be useless to eat. That is not survival by accident. That is technology. Fire changes everything, and this is where anthropologist Richard Wrangham enters the story. Wrangham argued that cooking did not just make food taste better. It made humans possible. Cooked food is easier to digest. It delivers more calories per bite than raw food because heat breaks down cell walls and unlocks energy that would otherwise pass straight through the body. Wrangham's research suggests that once ancient humans started cooking consistently, their guts could shrink and their brains could grow because digestion became cheaper and the freed-up energy went somewhere else, somewhere upstairs. So the diet was not meat. It was not purely plants either. It was cooked plants, wild game, insects, shellfish along coastlines, eggs when they could be found, and whatever the season allowed. Ancient humans were not loyal to a food group. They were loyal to whatever kept them alive that week. Think about what that actually required. No grocery store, no refrigeration, no guaranteed harvest. Every single day was a negotiation with the landscape. Where are the tubers hiding underground? Which berries are ripe and which ones will make you sick? Has the herd moved north? Ancient humans were not eating a diet. They were solving a puzzle over and over for their entire lives. This explains something strange about your own brain. Have you ever noticed how much mental energy food decisions still take up, even when the food is right in front of you? What to eat, when to eat, whether this counts as healthy. That constant background hum is not modern anxiety showing up out of nowhere. It is an ancient tracking system built for a world where a wrong food choice could genuinely kill you, still running quietly in a world where it mostly does not need to. Now consider variety. A modern diet, even a healthy one, might rotate through a few dozen ingredients on a regular basis. Reconstructed hunter-gatherer diets studied by researchers working in modern foraging communities show something wildly different. Some groups consumed well over 100 distinct plant and animal species across a single year. Not 100 meals, 100 different organisms, each requiring its own knowledge of when it was safe, when it was ripe, and how to prepare it. That knowledge was not written down anywhere. It lived entirely inside the group, passed from person to person, generation to generation, and it could vanish in a single lifetime if it was not taught correctly. That is a staggering amount of information to carry in your head just to eat dinner. And it explains something else about human behavior. Ancient food knowledge was never private. It was communal by necessity. If one person in a group knew which root was poisonous and never shared it, the whole group was at risk the next time that person was gone. Eating, for most of human history, was never an individual act. It was a survival system built entirely on trust between people. Feel that for a moment. The instinct you have to share a meal, to offer food to someone before eating in front of them, to feel slightly uneasy eating alone in a group setting, is not a modern politeness rule. It is the leftover shape of a system where hoarding food knowledge could get someone killed. Now for the twist that changes the whole picture. Ancient diets were not consistent. They were not stable across seasons, and this is the detail most people miss entirely. Spring might bring an abundance of greens and shoots. Summer might bring fruit and insects in huge quantities. Autumn might bring nuts and roots dense enough to store. Winter, in colder regions, could bring near starvation, with survival depending almost entirely on stored fat and whatever meat could be found. The human body did not evolve to eat the same thing every day. It evolved to handle scarcity, followed by abundance, followed by scarcity again, in an endless cycle tied to the seasons. That cycle is almost completely gone now. Modern life offers the same foods, at the same abundance, every single day of the year. Your body, still tuned to a feast-and-famine rhythm built over hundreds of thousands of years, was never designed for constant abundance. That mismatch is not a personal failing. It is a timeline problem. Culture changed in a few thousand years. Biology did not get the memo. So when you look at your fridge again, notice what is actually happening. That casual, uneventful reach for a snack represents something your ancestors never had, not once, not ever, in 300,000 years of existing as a species. Certainty. Food that is simply there, waiting, regardless of season, regardless of skill, regardless of luck. Ancient humans were not eating a diet the way that word gets used today. They were reading a landscape, tracking cycles, sharing knowledge, and adapting constantly because the alternative was not weight gain or a bad mood. It was death. Every plant identified correctly, every root cooked at the right time, every piece of shared knowledge was a small act of survival stacked on top of millions of others just like it, stretching back further than memory. Look closer at how that knowledge actually worked in practice. A child growing up in a foraging group did not learn about food from a lesson. There was no classroom, no chart, no lecture on nutrition. Learning happened by walking beside an adult, watching which leaves got picked and which got left behind, watching how a root got twisted rather than pulled, watching how long something sat near the fire before it was safe. Mistakes were rare because the cost of a mistake was enormous. One wrong mushroom, one undercooked root. That is not a bad afternoon. That is potentially the end of a life. So attention to detail, the kind that modern life rarely demands anymore, was once a basic requirement just to reach adulthood. Consider insects for a moment, because this is a detail most people skip entirely. Insects were not a fallback food or a last resort. In many regions, they were a dense, reliable source of protein and fat, available in predictable seasonal windows. Termite mounds, grubs beneath bark, locust swarms. These were not eaten out of desperation, they were targeted deliberately because they were abundant, easy to gather in bulk, and nutritionally rich. The modern discomfort around eating insects says more about recent cultural habits than it does about what human bodies are actually built to process. Shellfish tell a similar story. Along coastlines, discarded shell mounds, some enormous, some stretching back tens of thousands of years, show that coastal populations relied heavily on shellfish as a stable, low-risk food source. Unlike hunting large animals, which could fail on any given day, shellfish did not run. They did not need to be tracked. They simply needed to be found, and the tide brought a fresh supply on a predictable schedule. For groups living near water, this predictability may have mattered just as much as the nutrition itself. Now think about fat, because ancient diets did not treat fat the way modern culture often does. Fat was not feared. It was hunted for specifically. When early humans killed large game, the fattiest parts of the animal, organs, marrow, brain tissue, were frequently prioritized over lean muscle meat. Lean meat alone, eaten in large quantities without enough fat, can actually cause a dangerous condition sometimes referred to by later explorers as rabbit starvation, where the body cannot process excess protein without enough fat or carbohydrate to balance it. Ancient humans seem to have understood this instinctively long before anyone had a word for metabolism. This is worth sitting with for a second. A modern diet plan built around lean protein, stripped of fat, would have looked completely backward to someone living 40,000 years ago. Fat meant survival. Fat meant a body that could handle a bad week, a bad month, a stretch of failed hunts without collapsing. The instinct you might feel toward rich, fatty foods, the pull that culture often frames as weakness, is actually an old and deeply logical survival signal, still firing exactly as designed. Now return to the bigger picture, because all of these pieces, the plants, the fire, the shared knowledge, the insects, the shellfish, the fat, point toward the same conclusion. Ancient humans did not eat a diet. They ran a system, a constantly shifting, deeply cooperative, endlessly adaptive system built entirely around one goal, getting enough calories and nutrients to survive whatever the landscape offered that particular week. There was no single ancestral meal plan waiting to be rediscovered. There was only flexibility, applied relentlessly, generation after generation, until it became written into the biology of every person alive today. You carry all of that inside you right now, quietly, every time you open a fridge and barely think twice about what is inside.